We must guard, protect, and keep the home as God designed it. The home as God designed it, all right? And, of course, I'm sorry. If anybody needs that, of course, just about everybody's, well, a lot of people's got it. Some don't, maybe. Raise your hand if you don't have that material. I had some more, and that's the dangerous thing about being responsible for high-tech equipment and stuff like that, is because I had a PowerPoint, and so I came down here early not to be a burden on anybody else, and so I went upstairs and I put my little thumb drive in, and when I did, I saw what I wanted, and I touched it, and I don't know where it went. It ain't no more on this. It ain't on the computer. It's floating around out here somewhere. If y'all see it, grab it. So disgusting how that can happen. I mean, how can you do that? And that's supposed to be better? I've never lost a sermon like that before, but I have. So I can't really say that. But anyhow, so I'm going to try to remember everything that was really, really important on that slide and bring it out. But of course, we're talking about the whole principle of defending that which needs to be defended, recognizing there is a standard that God has given. And we're looking especially in three different areas and seeking to apply it that way, because the standard that God has given for the home, the standard that God has given for the church, the standard that God has even given for interpersonal relationships in a government setting. Those things are actually addressed in Scripture. And so what we're doing is recognizing the standard that God gave, and then when we apply the terms that we're talking about, that is, we're guarding or keeping, protecting, that is, we're simply recognizing that if the whole world said, we don't like what has always been accepted as being good and true about the home, and we're just going to reject it, we'll know that we can't. If there's red, that means what I put in there, and I probably don't have enough here. I'm sorry about that. Whole lot of apologizing and for not having enough material. So we established at the very beginning, asking the question from Psalm 11. If the foundations be destroyed, what will the righteous do? Well, we ask this question. I think it's a very important question to ask. What David says there as being a possibility, is it really a possibility? Can the foundations of society really be destroyed? Or is the result of the rejection of God's standard what really the problem is? No, there is a standard. And deep down, folks, even those that we would categorize in our world as being plumb goofy as it relates to things, there's so many things they accept as fact that we do too, because it's so obvious. When we get to the point, and we are in this society, where we even brought this up last week, when you've got a person who is being asked questions by senators, who's going to be on the Supreme Court to define what a woman is, and she will not even attempt to do so, that sounds like the foundations of society are shaken. Or it sounds like that particular person doesn't want to admit what I guarantee she admitted when she gave birth to a child, and that is that she's the only thing that could, and a male can't do that. But she wouldn't dare say that. She hid behind the idea, well, I may be a lawyer, but I'm not a biologist. Well, I'm not a doctor or a lawyer, either one, but some things are obvious without a degree, aren't they? And when it comes to the difference between human beings and males and females, then that just shows how far afield from what the Bible actually teaches from the very beginning that we have found ourselves in that position. So we looked at some different reasons why we know this is a subject that needs to be entertained. This is questions that we need to be asking, because when the Bible gives so many specific rules and regulations for the conduct that's to exist in the family unit, that matters. Because God would not be given so many specific things as to the smooth sailing of a family without there being repercussions when you fly in the face of those requirements. Simple as that. It's as with anything that God has said, okay, here's the requirements. Here's what will make your life the very best possible. Here's what you should do in your husband-wife relationship. Here's what you should do in your parents-children relationship. Here's all these things you should do. And when you do those things, as I've laid out for you, your life is going to be easier. You're going to be blessed here on this earth, and eternally you're going to be blessed immensely in heaven. Nah, we'll just do what we want to do. Now, most people are not so bold as to make that statement, but when they reject just basic, cold, hard facts, that's exactly what they're doing. They're thinking they can establish some type of substitute that will be just as good as what God has provided for us, and that's simply not the case at all. And from the example that we have, I know I've used illustration when Tammy went to college, went to Gallatin, what was that called? Vol State, okay? One of the first teachers she had when we went to college over there denied there was such a thing as absolute truth. He said there is no such thing as absolute truth. Now, what would be significant about a statement like that? He was making an absolute statement. He was saying, I know that you can't know anything. Now, wait a minute. That ain't fair. Well, I've got a doctorate degree and I'm teaching in the university. I don't care who you are. When you contradict the very statement you're making, you cannot know anything for sure, and I know you cannot know anything for sure, then I'm not going to pay attention to anything else you say, because you flat out contradicted common sense right there. If you can't know anything for sure, then you cannot say that you are accusing me of saying I can know something for sure, and you say you know I can't know nothing for sure, because you're contradicting yourself. Your own rope has hung yourself. And that's what we see so many times in our world today. And then we noted very quickly some of the consequences. Sometimes people say, well, when it comes to marriage in the home, all that matters is the boy and the girl that decides to get married. Is that true? Is that the only ones that matter? Are those the only ones that will face consequences for the decision to become husband and wife? Well, of course not. The last time I noted, if you've got a boy and a girl getting married, the boy and the girl have got parents, and they've got parents, and they may have brothers and sisters. You got aunts and uncles, you got cousins, you got all kind of people under consideration. And then you've got the community in which these children are deciding to become a couple. So all of society ends up being affected just by that one little old decision. I do. And we'll look at here probably next week the significance of that statement, I do, and what it means. And it seems sort of odd, I guess, in an adult class to be actually looking at, in hindsight, what we one time said in the past, you know. But there is significance to that statement, you know. Before God and these witnesses. What does that mean? Does that not mean before God and these witnesses? I thought that's what words mean. You know, before God and these witnesses, till death do us part, richer or poorer. Whoa. I remember the richer. I remember the in health. I remember the good. But did I really say in the bad? I'd really be there. Boy, what was I thinking? Must have been crazy. So there's more consequences than just us. And then the last thing, and this is where we're going to start right today. We know that this is a subject that needs to be discussed because there are so many attempts that are presently underway to get rid of marriage in the home. That's just a fact. And what's amazing is, one of the first times I put this material together, some 30 years ago, I quoted some material from the Communist Manifesto, okay? I want you to listen to some of these quotations, and this was going to be on the screen, but I didn't get it there. But here's from the Communist Manifesto on a chapter that is devoted to the family. All right, listen to this quotation. The bourgeois claptrap about family and education, about the hallowed correlation of parent and child. Now, there's some words there. Of course, I don't know what they'd been translated out of originally, German, I guess, maybe. So I don't know what the parallel to claptrap is in the German language for sure, but claptrap simply means nonsense, you know, foolishness. And some will say that the word actually means a pompous or important sounding nonsense. So what do they refer? What does the Communist Manifesto refer to as claptrap? There's a hallowed relationship that exists in the family, between members of the family, between parents and children. There's a hallowed existence there. There's something good and beneficial and blessed with that relationship. Who says that's claptrap? Communists do. Communists say it's claptrap. And when they use the word bourgeois, which is very hard for me to even say, when they say that, here's what they mean. Here's the definitions for that. Associated with the affluent middle class, who are often characterized as conventional, conservative, or materialistic in their outlook. If you're conservative in your outlook and you're a part of a middle class, then that means you're in this classification of people that need to be squashed. Do you feel like you're on the receiving end of being squashed sometimes? Are you in that middle part there where you actually view there's being something more above and beyond just the material existence of human beings, and there's something sacred about the relationships in the home? We're going to get rid of that, man. When capitalism is pushed to the side and Marxism takes its rightful place, and of course, according to the Communist Manifesto, you got to consider the source here. When he defines the term capitalist, according to Marx's theory, it's relating to a social class that owns the means of producing wealth and is regarded as exploiting the working class. So that group of people, of course, we would say it'd be above just the regular old normal working class in our society. But the sad thing is, in order for communism to work, then the middle class just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it encompasses everybody that's necessary to keep the elite in their position. So everybody's middle class, unless you happen to be a professional athlete or an actor or something, or a president of a World Bank or something. So this concept of getting rid of the family is deeply embedded in Marxist theory. So much so here, well, who would look upon the relationships in a family as being hallowed and sacred and honorable? Who would do that? Christians would, wouldn't they? Well, sure we would. As a matter of fact, everybody should recognize that this design for the home was not invented by man's imagination, but God designed it at the very beginning. He designed it when he brought Eve to Adam. This is now bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, Adam said. And thus, God has a say-so as to what's important and what we allow to cast aside. Now, here's another comment under this family section. He says, here's what it says. Of course, this is Marx and Engels, if you didn't know. The bourgeois family will vanish as a matter of course when its complement vanishes, and both will vanish with the vanishing of capital. Okay? Now, I realize we're talking about going on 2,000 or 200-year-old philosophies, but they've not been cast aside by history for sure. So what do you think he's talking about here? That the family is going to vanish as soon as the complement of the family vanishes, and both of them is going to vanish when capital vanishes, when communism takes over. What would they call the complement to marriage? It's prostitution. Prostitution. And so the way we get rid of marriage and prostitution, because they go hand in hand, according to Marx and Engels, I don't think I'd say that, but he does. So both those things we won't have to worry about anymore once we all drink the Kool-Aid and become Marxists. We don't have to worry about any such holy. Going a little bit further. Where did I put that at? Well, anyhow, it's on the screen. It's on the chart, so I'll have to remember it. But what it says is that women must pull the same load as men. They cannot be a blight on society without producing what men do. What does that sound like? It sounds like the feminist movement in the United States of America. That's what it sounds like. Who influenced that? Well, obviously, it goes back at least to the Communist Manifesto. To make men and women equal, there's no difference. And there is no hallowed relationship that exists in the family. Man, if there ever was a subject we need to be studying more than this one, I don't know what it'd be. You know? Because of the attacks that are constantly underway to destroy the very concept of the home. You know, it don't surprise us when we read from a Communist Manifesto that it's not the parents' responsibility to educate their children, it's the state's responsibility to educate the children. How's that going? Turning out real great, isn't it? The evidence is to the contrary, isn't it? Something's terribly wrong. And of course, all this did not happen in a vacuum. All this is not just, boy, I'm glad somebody's finally, we've known this from the beginning. And yet we're still going down this primrose path to destruction because of rejection of what the Bible says about the foundation of society, and especially with the home. Think about when it comes to why do you think marriages fail as often as they do? Why do you think husbands and wives no longer put forth the effort to be true to their marriage? Why do you think that is? Do what? Selfishness. Selfishness. I'd say that's probably the number one reason. And what we really need to come back to the basics of remembering is that when a marriage fails, and they fail tremendously, a lot. When a marriage fails, what happens is that the individuals in those marriages, before they fail as husbands and wives, they fail as human beings first. Now, maybe it's not both at the same time, but somebody fails to be the proper human being. Therefore, they fail to be the proper spouse they should be. So the failure is not just limited to, no, the failure is any arrangement that does not allow those involved in it become the best they can be here upon this earth and then arrive safely in heaven one day. That's what a successful family is. And hopefully when we looked at our example in the book of Ecclesiastes of Solomon, that was one of the points he was trying to get across. He was saying you're not going to find lasting happiness and satisfaction in anything that you can find in this world. Nothing. And remember what we said about Solomon? He was well able to make that statement because he tried. He went out every day saying, I'm going to find something that satisfies me today. And at the end of his life, he hadn't never found it. Well, I can buy it. Well, you can buy anything you lay your eyes on, and he says throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, that's what I did. I bought anything I wanted. I had anything I wanted. I tried anything I wanted. And it was all like trying to grab the wind and put it in a paper bag. Well, that's really lasting and satisfying. Well, of course not. So here's a man who tried to find all that happiness, but not from a spiritual standpoint, and it wasn't there. Most powerful man, the wisest man, the richest man, and yet he finally admitted happiness and satisfaction cannot be found exclusively here on earth. Can't be found here. Any happiness here has to be a pretense or a pretext for happiness eternally. It's similar to that. Not near as big, not near as good, but better nonetheless. So think about that. When individuals fail as human beings first, as Gabe said, one of the primary reason why marriages fail is because the members of the family fail as human beings first, but the contributing factor to that is selfishness. Selfishness. Now you think about how that relates even back to when we used our examples of Solomon, you know. And we used from a material standpoint how at a very early age people have the tendency to get all worked up and bent out of shape over something they think they've just got to have, you know. And I was telling Clayton, I was preaching this sermon yesterday to Clayton. He didn't have a choice. We was going to the dump, so he had to listen. And I said, you know, it's like a few years ago, it was Tickle Me Elmo. Everybody had to have, there were people that were paying $300 for us to Tickle Me Elmo because their kid had to have a Tickle Me Elmo. And then about a month after Tickle Me Elmo cost them way too much money, he was flushed down the commode because there was somebody else to come along and take Tickle Me Elmo's place. And that's the way kids are. But that's not just the way kids, that's the way human beings are. Whatever that shiny object is next down the road, that's what I want. And when I get that, I'll be happy. If I could just have me a tickle me elbow, I'd never want anybody else no more. I'd never want another toy if I had me a tickle me elbow. And yet that don't last long at all. Or that new car. Man, the smell of a new car. Do you know they've started, I've thought about buying some. I didn't because I knew it wouldn't work, but they've got new car smell. Can you imagine how many gallons it'd take to pour on my truck to make it smell like a new car? But they got new car smell. You know how people do? Get a new car. No grandkids getting in my new van with dirty Cheeto hands after a month. Then he's coming in every time, you know, because the news wore off. The smell's not there. Now it's dried Cheetos, you know, the smell. But it was really something at the beginning. That's the way everything that's material is. Everything material wears out because that's the only thing it can do. You think it's going to get better? Have y'all ever had closet doors that wouldn't close like they did at one time? You ever had drawers in your kitchen? I mean, fancy drawers that somebody built, and all of a sudden they just start opening on their own. You ever heard that happening? It's called wearing out. And everything about this world wears out. Why don't we put so much confidence in stuff that wears out? Doesn't make any sense. And so as it relates to selfishness, most of the time, that selfishness is of a materialistic variety. Sometimes it's not, you know. And we will have to look a little bit more in depth at that as time goes on for sure. So recognizing the standard that God has given and the respective roles of human beings within the family, husbands have, is there such a thing as women's role? Is there such a thing as men's role? Absolutely. I heard this morning, who was it? Oh, it was Joe Guy this morning. Joe Guy on Good News Today. He said, did you realize, what was the word I said? Yeah. Did you realize that the word gullible is not even in the dictionary? Now, how many people's going to go look and see if gullible's in the dictionary? Well, of course it's in the dictionary. By me saying gullible's not in the dictionary, don't make it's not in the dictionary. But how many people would believe that? Well, we know they do. They believe everything there is known to man for them to believe except the truth, and they swallow it hook, line, sinker. So gullible's not even in the dictionary. Got to be careful, because that's what's wrong. We're gullible. We believe things to be so, and hopefully we're a little bit more in tune with thinking about it further before we actually jump the next time, hopefully. Because we have, in fact, been deceived so many times that sometimes it's easy to become skeptical of anything that happens to come down the path. Communist is last statement. Communists envision the time when there will be neither capital nor family. Now, just think about that. The communist vision, no families and no capital. Now, if you would like a setting like that, then obviously you're the one that's in charge of it, because you're the only one that's going to be living high on the hog. Everybody else is going to be suffering. But no family and no capital. They tie together. What is it that ties those two things together? What is it that ties capital, money, resources, and the family together? It's freedom. It's what ties them together. And we can't have you deciding how many kids you're going to have. Are you kidding me? If you happen to be living in China, up until very recently, until they realized they were killing their own selves, and their one-child policy went terribly bad for the Chinese. Now, they're not hurting for people, but they need more people. Did you know there's Americans that are working in China? Well, they are. Important. When we set them up a conduit to the Mexican border, and we'll have our problem and their problem taken care of at the same time. We get them right. So, the policy that says that children can be aborted for any reason at any time is obviously an attack on the family. A society that looks upon divorce as a possibility of it being legally looked upon as a no-fault variety, that's an attack on the family. When divorce is granted so easily, and the only reason you can't get a divorce in the state of Tennessee is for adultery, that's an attack on the family. When our heroes are zeros. In reality, morally and spiritually speaking, that's an attack on the family. When moral depravity seems to be the norm for most people in public positions, that's an attack on the family. Just about anything and everything you look at in our world today is an attack on marriage and the home. And since it is the case that societies are comprised of individual homes, when the home's under attack, society's under attack. And we've been there for a long time. And it's not anything out of the ordinary, as was made obvious to us in the period of the Judges in our Bible class this morning. But we have to just remain focused and depend upon the standard that God has given for us to follow. All right. Trying to think here. Have no idea. What time is this class going to get over? It's 15 hours? Well, we went way longer than that. 6 more minutes. All right. We still haven't got anybody brave enough to try to change the clock again. You know, and we've got 2 broken clocks, 2 broken heads of people on the floor, not breaking, but it's still an hour fast. So if you come in here, Gabe, you can think, well, I'm in Chattanooga time. We're going right along fine. All right. I wish I hadn't lost that material, because that was so good material. You'll get to see it one of these days. All right, think about it from the standpoint here that we established just a minute ago, the significance of saying I do. When you say I do, when a man and a woman stands before God and these witnesses, and they proclaim and repeat vows to each other, they exchange rings, and they say stuff like, our love is just like this round ring here. This is gold, and our love is... We've made such a big to-do out of the show of it all that the significance of it is oftentimes overlooked, sadly. And I don't know how many times I've seen huge expenditure of large sums of money being spent for a wedding that doesn't last long enough to pay the bill for the wedding. Sadly. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. There need to be communication on the beginning end so that wouldn't have ended up resulting at the tail end. Something happened there. I'm thankful that a few years ago, the state of Tennessee actually added a provision in the marriage license in the state of Tennessee that if you'll go through 4 hours of premarital counseling, then they'll give you a break on your marriage license. You know, I don't know how many dollars it is or whatever, but it is financially beneficial. And you might not be surprised to know that I've had people to call me on a Friday night who were fixing to get married on a Saturday and want me to give them the speed issue so they could get a break. Can't do that. Yeah, can't do it. We'll do it after we get married. Then it wouldn't be premarital counseling, would it, if you're already married? So one of the things that comes up in those discussions with individuals is how little people actually think about what they're getting into. I don't know why that is, you know. Maybe this has always been a problem. People don't really consider the consequences. Or maybe it's always been the case that people did consider the consequences and consider themselves to be the exception to the rule, you know. I mean, my grandma, Mama's mama, was 14 years old when she married Grandpa, who was 21. And then Mom was born when Granny was 15, okay. That's a different time. Of course, Granny was full grown when she was 13, I guess, 4'6", and never got any taller than that, you know. But that was a different time. But I know one thing for sure. I used to, when Tammy would see how my grandmother waited on my grandpa, hand and foot. I mean, she did everything from cut his toenails to peel his apple, you know. And he never said boo. He'd just say, and she, what is it now? And I kept on taking my wife down there to see my great-grandmother like that. Come on, honey, pattern yourself after her. Come on. Please. She never peeled an apple for me. Never cut my toenails either. But that's a different time. And the thing, there's no doubt about it. I never did sit down and talk to them at any length of time at all. But when they said I do, it was for good. Well, no doubt about it. Were there times in which Granny was tempted to hit him over the top of the head with a skillet? No doubt about it. I saw a few of those instances. He was so spoiled that Grandpa he drove a truck and delivered lumber all over Tennessee, Alabama, and North Mississippi. And he'd have to leave the house at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So Granny'd get up and fix steak and gravy and biscuits for him that time of day. And I'd always get up and eat with them, and then get up and eat again with the rest of everybody else. So I got up, and that morning, Granny had his biscuits coming out of the oven 2 at a time every 5 minutes. Okay, she'd throw those biscuits out there, slice them open, put a piece of American cheese that she cut off, put it on there, and throw the gravy on it and start to melt. Grandpa said, "You cut my cheese too thick." I looked at Granny, she was gritting her teeth. She had that skillet right there coming out of there. She didn't say a word. Didn't say a word. She cut his cheese thinner the next time. That's a different time. What a cantankerous old buzzard he was. Mean, you know. Well, a lot of guys are just like that, you know. He provided the wherewithal for them to raise 4 kids right there and within a very short distance for where she could walk to work, and all those years. That was a different time. Nowadays, that would never work. Even if Grandpa was the greatest thing coming along since sliced bread or indoor plumbing, still might get a skillet upside the head because of the different way that we view things today. And that's not an encouraging thing either. There's so many things that will allow us to get over our selfishness, which oftentimes is the very thing that leads to communication problems and then ultimately the destruction of the family as God designed for it to be. Lord willing, we'll pick up here sometime Wednesday night. No, we won't. Next Sunday morning. Jim will be with us on Wednesday night, and you've got an extra few minutes to visit where you need to go. Thank you so much.